Hi, guys. Welcome to Making Music. I'm Gary Wineroth from Guitar Showcase, and with me today we have the fabulous Jack Van Breen from Guitar Showcase, the fabulous Sam Carlino from Sam's Barbecue, and a great patron of Guitar Showcase, and the fabulous Dan Aronie, 34 years or so at Guitar Showcase, going on 34, something like that.
We're getting close.
We're getting close. He started there when he was 3 years old. He's not as old as he looks. It's not a problem. Well, today our show is about guitars and some vintage guitars, some mandolins, and we're going to talk about some reproductions of some of the instruments. So, Sam, why don't we start with this mandolin? Now, is this an original or is this a reproduction?
Well, I'll tell you, this is a reproduction of a 1923 F5 Lloyd Loar mandolin made by the Gibson Mandolin and Guitar Company. And they made just over 200 of these dating back to 1922 to 24. And they're in such high value today, they're in the $185,000 range. So
for an original? For
an original. This is a copy, and this is a distressed copy, as you can probably tell from the scratches on the back and the distressing of the varnish. It's got scratches and the varnish is coming up, and they authenticated this so well that it really has that vintage vibe to it. People want an old style mandolin, but obviously you can't afford to pay the $180,000 price tag, nor would you want to bring it outside either. So,
it sounds great too.
Now, excuse me, is this the one that Charlie Darrington did?
That's Charlie Darrington, who just recently passed away.
That's a sad story.
Yeah, it is a sad story. He was the acoustic engineer for Gibson Guitar Company, and last year I was at Lorefest, and there's a photo of me that ended up in the Chronicle, where I was around all of these vintage mandolins. They come to one place, and they went to Bakersfield last year for a big meeting of the minds, and I got to inspect and play, I want to say in the neighborhood of 40 mandolins, which was incredible. You're talking about $7 to $10 million worth of instruments in one little area, and I was able to
compare them
and compare them.
Do we have a shot of that?
Yeah,
I mean, is that on the? Where was that on newspaper?
It was in the Chronicle, and it got picked up on the AP Wire and was shown all over the country. I had people calling me from back east saying, "Yeah, look, I saw you in the paper."
What were you looking at in the shot?
I was looking at mine, and my friend Rich Evans was actually looking at a real one, and we were comparing notes as far as.
At $180,000.
Yeah, exactly the difference between.
That's cool. Well then, Jack, what have you got there? This is one of yours, Sam, right? This is. Okay, you bought this at Guitar Showcase, I assume.
Absolutely. I bought all my instruments at Guitar Showcase over the years.
Now this is an OM45 Roy Rogers commemorative. What a beautiful instrument.
Yeah, it really is.
Sounds great too.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
And it's got his signature on it. That's it. That's okay. Let me show the back of that guitar.
His son actually signed signed the label inside with Chris Martin.
His son did?
Yes.
And Christopher Martin?
The president of the Martin Guitar Company.
And he's the fourth or fifth? What is he? He's the
fourth.
Fourth. They've been in that generation since 1833. That's a very cool guitar. Well, Sam, tell me, you have now, this is a new reproduction of an old guitar.
Exactly.
Okay, which is a neat thing, and I firmly believe that these are tomorrow's collectibles, don't you, Dan?
Absolutely. I mean, it's already been proven when we go on and talk about some of the electrics and what's happened with them. When these companies are able to keep these limited productions actually really limited, they have absolutely taken off, and the value has just skyrocketed very quickly. And you'll see sometimes limiteds of 25, sometimes they do 50. Martin is amazing. I don't know where they pick these numbers up, but they'll do 71 of one, or 83 of another, or 52. I mean, they never do 50 or 100. It's always some bizarre number, and I'll have to ask them sometime why. You know,
where they pick that number?
Where they're doing that. Yeah, that's always a good one.
Well, Dan, tell me, in your experience, then, is it the lower the number in the limited edition?
Absolutely, and who is behind it?
The
who is
star
the
power
endorsing
behind
the star power?
Okay.
There's no doubt in the recent past that, you know, for acoustic guitars, Eric Clapton, of course, has a guitar out. Steve Miller. I mean, Martin's done a lot of stuff. Taylor has done with the Doyle Dykes, and some of the newer stars. They've done some great limited editions as well. Gibson the same way with the Lennon. And the Elvis Presley. I mean, this just goes on, but these great players, and where they keep it actually limited, when you start running into 200, 300, 400, you know, it kind of feels like a Kincaid picture. And I don't know about you, but I just kind of get blown away when I walk by one of those, and you know, one of 7,000.
Yeah,
that doesn't work for me. You know?
Okay. Yeah. Well, Sam, you've got an old Martin back here.
Yeah, I got a nice story, and if Jack can take that 65 D18 up, and we'll talk about this for a minute, because I've been going into Guitar Showcase since 1982 when I first started playing guitar, and I started collecting about 10 years ago, and every time I go in, I'd bug Dan. I'd say, hey, you got any old Martins? And the answer was always, nothing right now, or we got this, we got that. And one day he said, yeah, we have this old beater, but it's all messed up. The bridge is coming up a 1/4 inch, and the neck needs a reset, and the frets are real bad. And I said, well, ask Gary what he wants for it. So Gary gave me a very fair price on it, and you know, this guitar, which cost me less than $1,000 initially, after getting all the work done, is in excess of $4,000 now.
Yeah, and I wish I'd never sold it to you, Sam.
You always say that.
And I thank you for letting this old beater go, because it looked like a boat oar.
Yeah, at the time, and you did put substantial work. But let's hear this old beater.
Yeah, let's hear something.
Beautiful. Yeah. It's a beautiful guitar.
But that's a perfect example of being able to find an old guitar, whether it's at a garage sale, or whether you know somebody who has a good guitar, like Gary was saying before. It has to be, you know, a good one.
It has to be the major American makers, and I've said this on other shows, and I'd like to say it again. Yeah. American guitars are the ones that bring the premium prices. Now, you've got one of the oldest, of course, was Martin. Yep. It's the oldest, I think. And then the next would be Gibson and Epiphone. They go in the 1890s, 1897 for Epiphone, I think. Yeah. And then coming forward a little bit, 52 or so was when Guild came out. Is that correct, about in there, Dan?
I don't know. I'm not as familiar
somewhere
with the Guild,
in early 1950s. The American guitars are worth the money, and America is king. That's America.
That's one of the things that I picked up from you, Gary, was that I asked you, what's the best guitar? Because you can buy an old Strat right now for $50,000 or $60,000, but it was a $250 guitar 45 years ago.
That's right.
Now, my question to you, and what the audience should be concerned with, is what guitar should people be buying today that we're speculating, of course, but what would be worth something in the future?
Well, I think Dan has a good example over there in the Jimmy Page Les Paul.
Oh,
now, there's 3 incarnations of this guitar. Tell us about this one, Sam. That's your department. I know you know more about this because you're a fan.
Yeah, the Jimmy Page set was really well done by Gibson, the way that it was marketed. They only limited this particular guitar to 25.
25. That's what I call
in
limited.
the world.
Yeah.
And then the next best part is they distressed it exactly with every marking and scratch and dent and cigarette burn that Jimmy Page put on the guitar. Then the next best thing is that he actually signed it.
These all went to his house in England.
Yeah, so these were shipped over to England, and they were numbered up to 25, and he signed, and then he played it.
So because don't break a string, Jack.
He got to pick through 35 guitars, and he picked the 25 best out of the 35 that were out there.
His DNA is on that guitar.
That's right.
That's right. Be careful, don't smear his DNA.
Well, this is a perfect example. Like 20, I mean, here's where new guitars have taken off. So these came on the market, what, 2.5, 3 years ago, and they came on at between $20,000 to $26,000. And a bunch of people just turned them over immediately and made their money and were happy. And then all of a sudden, it like 6 months later, it popped up to $30,000. And then a year later, the new bar was set at $55,000. And then it went to $60,000. So after 2 years, it jumped from 20 to 25 all the way up to $60,000 for that guitar. And now one just sold recently in New York for $100,000.
$100,000.
So this has gone in under 3 years from 20 to 25,000 to $100,000.
That's a new
That would be this one, right?
Don't drop it.
The one of the 25.
Yeah.
That's a $100,000 guitar. I don't want to touch it.
Yeah.
Yes. No,
and
that's
so
beautiful.
then to keep this, it is amazing. And what happened then is they came out with, and this is Murphy.
The Tom Murphy aged, but they hired him back to age these.
Right, and Tom Murphy is the key component to this as well. Because Murphy has a gentleman who's developed a reputation as making the best copies in the Gibson, and then he did a second run of 150.
Yeah, those are 1 through 150 that are numbered.
Okay, there's the second one, and there was 150 of those. Still a very limited run.
Distressed again, right, but not hand signed.
But they have a certificate authenticity.
Okay.
And
to prove it's real.
Jimmy. See, there you go. That's an example of
that's what they look like from. And it's important. We need to talk about that just a little bit, because if you don't have documentation to document the story of the guitar and who made it, because there are a lot of fakes out there.
There is.
I mean, Mr. Murphy, if he weren't an honest man, could make fakes of these guitars if he didn't work for Gibson.
Absolutely.
Each little crack, supposedly in the finish, he does with an X-Acto knife.
Yes.
Every little thing in there that what looks like lacquer checking, he carves in there with a knife. I mean, the man is a true artist.
Is an artist.
And there's no doubt about it that there are probably other artisans in the world that could do these sorts of things. So I can't overemphasize how important it is to have documentation.
Stories, pictures. I have a great example. We got in, and this is maybe 5, 6 years ago, a gentleman walked in and said, I have a guitar that Bill Graham gave me. And I go, yeah, right. We get the Hendrix. I own Hendrix's guitar and so and so. And I said, prove it. He says, well, I have a picture of Bill and myself with Neil Schon in a picture, and I used to work for Bill, and he gave it to me, and he got it from B.B. King. I said, get the picture. The picture tells 1,000 stories or 1,000 words, and it's worth, it'll bring the value of that up. It makes it real. So he brings the picture back, and there's a picture of Bill hugging the employee and Neil Schon with his girlfriend, and looked like Tommy Castro in the picture as well, all getting together, and it authenticated this.
And that's the one that's on the wall at Showcase.
And that's the wall, we have it on the wall at Guitar Showcase. And we have lots of stories like that. It's great, and the story and the pictures, they mean everything.
They have to be
real. No, they do. This is the third part of the incarnation of an unlimited run, but actually isn't an unlimited run because they've only agreed to make in the neighborhood of 400 with Jimmy, by 475.
Which is still pretty limited
and
compared to some.
They're in the process right now of renegotiating a new run. So this may be a final run for this, and that I think it's just amazing that you've got these limited editions with such big name players, and
but look at this. We got 100,000. We have 20 to 30,000. And we have 6,000, and they're virtually
in that range, in that ballpark.
In that ballpark right now.
And the book, the price guide. Let's talk about that for a second, because it actually is.
Well, I think we have a picture of the cover.
Do you? Okay,
of the price guide.
It's so far behind the times. If we can look at that just to show what that price guide looks like, Dan, you have one there too, I know. The problem is that the market is changing.
There we go.
Here's
There's
what
the
it looks
picture. That's
like.
what we needed. Yeah.
This is a great tool. Guitars that are not up and coming, like a lot of the jazz boxes and a lot of the older Epiphones, or even some of the Martins and Gibson flat top acoustics. This is a decent tool, but for some of these guitars, they're just jumping so fast that, for instance, that guitar that we know one sold for $100,000 back east somewhere, I don't know who did it, is shown in there at under $30,000, isn't it? Yeah. And that's ridiculous. That's how far behind they are.
That's one that has fallen behind, fallen through the cracks.
But this is why you need I mean, there's 5 or 6 price guides out right now. That has gotten closer than any other price guide we've seen.
It is the best I've seen.
Consistently better.
Well, Sam, you do a lot of research.
I'm really into this, and I got to tell you, I went in last week because I called up, and it's January, and I said, "Do you guys have the 2007 price guide?" They said, "Yes, we do." So I shot down to Showcase, and I said, where are they at? And they said, and Dan says, "We got 3 copies over there." And I said, "I'll buy them all." And Gary said, "What do you need 3 copies for?" And I said, "Well, I need one for my office.
I like this.
I need one for my home, and I need one for my car. Because if I'm on my way home and I see a garage sale and I stop and I find an old Martin ukulele and I want to know what that ukulele is worth, I can flip to that price guide, and there's a generalization of price that the instrument's worth.
That gets you in the ballpark.
Yeah.
Right.
So I know I'm not overpaying for it.
So that's important. I mean, it's a starting point.
Yeah.
And we have to have a reference. Dan, I know it's tough. You know, at Guitar Showcase, when we buy vintage guitars, which we've done for 40 years, 41 now, Dan is a classic. I like your 3 prices. Okay, here's the guitar. And, if this is a reproduction, which is a Jeff Beck reproduction. This is made by John English. It's serial number 101. It's a beauty.
By Fender, right?
By Fender, absolutely. And it has all the documentation. I believe we have some documentation on this particular guitar. We have what the Fender custom shop certificates look like.
Yeah, here it is right here.
This is the kind of thing. The other one was from Gibson. This one is from Fender, and this says Jeff Beck Esquire, serial number 101. And this is the kind of thing you have with this kind of guitar. But when Dan buys a guitar like this, and Dan does this a lot, okay, because people will come and they'll say, well, someone passed away, this guitar was under the bed, what is it worth? And Dan, you usually give them 3 prices, like cash today, if you want to wait 6 months, and then in a year, and kind of explain how you do that.
Well, there's a retail price, there's a quick sell and a slow sell, and then there's also guitars with issues. So most of the guitars, everything has been picked clean so much that you very rarely see guitars coming in anymore that don't have issues, which means they're not 100% original. You can get a guitar that may look scraped up like this Telecaster or Esquire, but if it's all original, even though the finish is worn off, it's still original. The frets haven't been changed.
The original parts.
The original parts are all there, but what you'll get invariably now, since there's so few and so many have left the country, is, like I say, guitars with issues, refrets, which is the least of the worries, but because most guitars over a certain period of time, the frets wear out. You need to get them refinished. But the refinish is the real stickler. It really kicks the value down. In some cases, 50%.
So you're saying, and this is important to our viewers.
This is very important.
Very important.
Yeah.
This look
is
torn
worth
up,
more.
Half of the finish missing. This look is worth more on an older guitar
than this guitar,
than a brand new one like this. Than the look. And this is an old guitar that's been refinished.
Yeah. Here's a guitar we got from auction that belonged to Ross Valerie of Journey. And this went to auction, and this guitar, if it was all original, is in the neighborhood of, I'm going to guess, $80,000 right now.
If it had not been refinished and had not had some changed parts.
And there's changed parts.
Especially with the pedigree.
Right, and the fact that you have it, that belonged to the bass player for the Journey when he used it in the studio.
It's so tough for people. They say, oh, well, look at this, it's ugly. I want to get it to look good, and you don't understand that they just lost thousands, in some cases.
Well, it brings the value of this down to about $25,000.
Now here's an older one that's got a lot of wear.
This is one we got from Southwest Australia, of all places. This came halfway around the world,
and that's fairly rare because it has gold hardware and it's a hardtail. This does not have a tremolo.
Right. This is
There's no tremolo
rare. With original finish.
Well, there's a lot of people that thought. Turn that one over, Sam, if we can see. Behind that white plate, there's a big chunk of wood missing where you have the tremolo block and the springs and so forth, and on this you don't. And there's a lot of people who think that this sounds better, has more resonance, and that it sustains better. And
I think everything plays a part into the way these
and
instruments
it sounds
sound.
good. So that's that's part of it. Let's hear this. This is an original 62, right? Stratocaster. But the guy on Lawrence Welk didn't sound like that. I mean, he was doing Misty or something. That's what the Strat was originally made to do, by the way. Is that kind of...
And Jimi Hendrix changed everything.
Jimi Hendrix changed that a little. Yeah, he did. Yeah. So that's a good example of an all-original guitar, and kind of a rare one because of the gold hardware and the hardtail, lack of the tremolo. Yep. Although the tremolo is more popular. But because it was more popular, this is more rare. By the way, my first Strat was a 59 and it was a hardtail. And so this is kind of near and dear to me that way. Now, this guitar has a lot of change parts and is not worth any, looks much nicer.
Well, there's a great story behind this because this actually went to auction and it got auctioned off for $25,000. This was about a year ago, and it was bought by a local venture capitalist who's also a guitar collector, and he got it at, this was out of an auction house in Texas, and he picked it up for $25,000 as an original 50s Stratocaster, and he got it, opened it up, and he looked at it, and in 1 second he knew this is not original. So he brought it, and he called him and said, "Hey, I'm not going to pay $25,000 for this."
So he rescinded the sale.
He rescinded the sale because it wasn't original,
right?
And he renegotiated. Well, luckily for him, they renegotiated, and he got it at a reduced price, and they were willing to do that for him, which really keeps their reputation above ground, because it could have been in the...
That leads me to the next...
To say it lightly, in the toilet after that.
Yeah, the next caveat out there is beware of the frauds on the internet.
Oh, believe me.
I mean, this, here was a legendary auction house who made an honest mistake.
Right.
Because someone told them something and they believed it, or someone cataloged
they didn't know
it.
either. Yep.
And they just looked at it and said, well, it's nicer than this one, it's probably original, And on the internet, you get a lot of stuff like that.
And right now, with the value of these as high as they are, there are people out there making incredible fakes, and they have absolutely run through the auction houses and online. And we don't want to name any names, but when you're doing 1 billion transactions and 1% are fraudulent, that's still a large number. That's a large number.
It's a large number.
Yeah. So we've talked about this Jeff Beck Esquire. This is a recent limited edition. We only have about 5 minutes, so we need to kind of go through one of the more famous guitars that has been just recently given a lot of publicity is the Eric Clapton Blackie. Okay, probably you've seen the hoopla on the internet, and it's a guitar. Once again, look at it. It's all torn up and looks like been through the dryer and the ringer and drug behind the pickup and that sort of thing. But this guitar was an original. A copy of the original. This is a reproduction, and these sold for $20,000. They sold, I think,
in a couple hours.
Yeah, they sold them out in a couple hours. Because this is an exact reproduction made by Fender again, with documentation of the actual.
I like even the cigarette burn up here because Eric was always known for leaving a cigarette burn right up on the headstock here, and right there there's a nice big black burn that's
absolutely
that they've had to recreate, and it'd be interesting to see how they, how they'd even make that.
Well, this is going to be an interesting piece because with the amount that they made, we don't know if this is going to collect value for a while. I mean,
we don't know.
I think it's going to go at a slower rate.
Time will tell.
Right.
This started rather high. This started at $20,000, which is and for a reproduction, although we're starting to see that now. Guitar manufacturers are not stupid. They're going to say, hey, if these old things are worth 150, 200, 300, 400, well, the original for this sold for what, 980,000?
90, yes.
Almost $1 million.
Yeah, almost $1 million.
Almost $1 million. And then they replicated it. So if you look at it that way, if you can buy a reproduction very cheap compared to, and it sold for charity auction.
For charity.
For the Crossroads Foundation.
And that's what most of these artists that are putting their name behind all these signature model guitars, the proceeds that they get from these guitar companies, most of the time do go to charities.
Absolutely.
Nice to see.
And a lot of these artisans are patrons, and they take care of us. Well, we're just about out of time. Have you got anything you want to talk about real quick?
I want to mention that Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Okay, let me get that for you.
Because that's a perfect example of a guitar that came out in the price range of about $10,000, and now these are in the neighborhood of 30. And this one's really beat up.
That
yeah,
puppy
this
is.
Stevie really did a number on his.
And again, that's a reproduction of his favorite guitar.
Right. And the original's in a vault, and his brother is in charge of it, and he allowed them to take it and actually dismantle it. And the neck and every part of this guitar is exactly built.
It's there, right.
With a micrometer down to Stevie Ray Vaughan's. Even the pickups are specially wound. It's an amazing, amazing instrument. And
it's ugly,
it just
but
goes to show that there are value in newer guitars if you're looking for what's going to be worth something in the future.
How many of these did they run, do you know?
I think they had 100.
I think around 100.
Right.
Yeah.
And today's limited editions and the special, artist guitars are going to be tomorrow's collectibles.
Right.
Yep.
And so for the people who weren't around in the 50s or the 60s to buy this stuff when it was cheap, you can buy the new stuff and hopefully hold it long enough. In some cases, like those Jimmy Pages, it was almost overnight.
You know what you mentioned before, but I really do believe, I mean, if you look at the last 5 to 10 years, the stock market, and compare it to the vintage instrument market, I think vintage instruments
they've outperformed
the S&P.
the Dow.
Well, I think
and the
this is
S&P.
why you've seen them spike, because 2 years ago they were running articles in business magazines that said this is a great investment, and all of a sudden now you're getting non-players getting into this market. And we have seen in the last 6 months to 1 year a spike like we've never seen ever in the history of vintage guitars. They have taken off, and I can't even keep up.
It's hard for any of us.
Yeah, and what you're seeing is a lot of non-players see it as an investment, as a beautiful work of art investment.
Playable art. It's true. Right. Well, we're out of time, guys. We got to go. Thanks, Dan.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam.
Right,
thank you, Jack. Let's hear Blackie here as we go out.